Hello, good evening, everyone. Welcome to AK Academy. It's Ahmed Muzaffar here with you. Right now, we are in the process of developing the client side of this nice project. As you have seen until the previous video, we have implemented the full API from the very scratch. We have started from the bottom with nothing, an empty project, and we have implemented the full API. And right now, it is basically available online to use. Maybe I'll going to share also the link again if you would like to have a look at the Swagger UI. If you are just new and would like to follow only with the client side part of this course. So we are just going to have a look at, as I've said, right now we are going to start on the client side based on the UI, or based on the API, sorry, that we have created in the previous 8 videos. So this is the link for API if you would like to have a look. If you weren't follow with us from the beginning. So I'm going to share the screen right now. Okay. So here it is, the API that we have implemented. And as you can see here, we have, it's about multiple parts. First one, we have the authentication, we have the comments, we have the playlists, we have the videos, and the default one existing by the ASP.NET Core the template. So for the first video on the client side, we are going basically first to have a look at the Microsoft Fluent UI library implemented for the Blazor. And then we are going to talk about the authentication system client side, how we are going to get started with, like the login, and implement like all the infrastructure that's ready to go ahead and start building the other pages. So basically for now, this is everything as a quick introduction. We are going to get started now. And so thanks for joining, all of you. And yeah, really happy to see you here. Now, if we go here, before we get started and open the project, here there is a very nice repository. I don't know if any of you have take a look at this before, but this is an implementation for the Microsoft Fluent UI, the React components into Blazor. The community here and the owner of this repository and all the contributors have done a very amazing job to make that UI available for Blazor and very easy to use. We can take a look at that. And meanwhile, we can have a look and open the Microsoft Fluent UI. So let's go to the official website. Okay, great. So this is basically the Microsoft Fluent UI official website. The Fluent UI, or the Fluent design language, let's say, it's basically the design language that Microsoft follows in all its applications and operating system, like the Windows. If you can see that the Windows, this is called the Fluent UI. And for web, Microsoft has this. You can see this while you are dealing with all the Microsoft applications available on web, like Microsoft Azure or Microsoft Office. You can see the same design that looks fancy somehow. So this is called the Fluent UI. For the web, which is basically you are building web apps, and the idea is we are those libraries available for React.js, but the community here translated that into a Blazor, and right now we have ability to build UIs with the Fluent UI with almost like somehow all the components implemented, and the others just like getting ready or on the way. So if we look at the sample that's available here, okay, before we have, okay, Brian, that's so nice to hear about that. Yeah, Blazor actually is very great, and it's going to allow you to build a lot of great stuff and business apps or like personal apps, networks, or other systems. It's just great. And in this course, we are going to take a look at that, how we are going to do this from the very scratch. Either you are following on Mac or on Windows, the process is going to be somehow the same. you can follow if you'd like using the Visual Studio for Mac. So it's going to be, I think it's a little bit better experience than Visual Studio Code, but still you can build full apps with VS Code. So this is the Microsoft Fluent UI library available. As you can see here, we have a lot of nice components. If you look at if you are dealt with Azure before or Microsoft Outlook or whatever, any other Microsoft product, you are going to see the same buttons and the same font and all these nice capabilities like available here. We have the drop-down, and we have a huge variety of components that's basically very useful to all type of apps. We have like this rating, and we have a slider, text field, date picker, calendar. So basically the guys did a very, very good job implementing this. And here for the lists, we have amazing set of lists. And we have many types like this one. And we have the cards, we have the comment bar, we have all the stuff. Okay, the link, I'm going to put this link in the comments, just this here. So you can follow along. And you can find the link for the GitHub repository at the top of the page. Like here, you can see view GitHub repo of Blazor Fluent UI. Okay, so what else? Let's make a very quick look. So this is the comment bar, yeah, that you can see on the top of all the Microsoft apps. And in addition to this, here we have the context menu. It looks very nice. And we can have a look at the nav bar. It's also support trees. We have, in addition to this pivot table or tabs. It looks very well, and just like the one available in the Windows 10. And we have this menu, that the famous ribbon menu that available in Microsoft Office. You can see that it's basically just a great. And at the end here, we have many nice things. Those are a set of messages. And we have progress bars, banners, and this one is my favorite. I like this component very much. Like when you click on this, you have this tooltip here, but it's somehow advanced, so it's called callout. And many other things available here. You can take all your time to discover all of those. So basically right now, before we go to the authentication and this stuff, let's go ahead and implement this, initialize this components in our project. And then we can move back to the authentication, which is the first part of the project. And before we leave, we have this nice one here. So you can turn between light mode and dark mode very easily. So it's just working very fine. So to implement that, we are going to follow the specification they have set in the URL here for the installation and for how to implement that in a Blazor client-side project. So let's get started step by step. First, I'm going to open Visual Studio. Okay. And here, go to our project. Okay, so this is great. Right now, we have all of this available. You can clone this from the GitHub, github.com/aksoftware98/.NET Labs, so you can have access to the full repository available here. And we will forget right now about the server side. All our concentration right now will become on this empty project. Basically, it's still just fresh and new. So the first step is to go to dependencies. We will go to Manage Nuget Packages and go to Pros. And here, search for Blazor Fluent UI.AllComponents. The good thing about this implementation is they have each single component in a specific package, or you can get the all component to basically get all of those together. But in case just you need to use a specific part of the library, you can do that by just searching for Blazor Fluent UI. And here you can see like you have access for the icons, for the layers, for the pop-ups or callout, whatever, as a separated components. Or you can search for all component. I like it this way very, very much. So if we click on this, let's click on the install. OK, great. So right now we have it installed. We have OK, I'm going to share the links of those here. This is the installation page. I think you have access for that. And we have the how to use it on the client side. Yeah, please confirm if you have access for it right now. OK. So right now, let's basically move to this page and start following the steps one by one to implement that in our project. So the first one is to add the link tag to our index.html page. And basically, this one is for the styles and for the JavaScript related to this. So to do that, we are going to go to the solution, www.root. Let's go to index.html. And here, OK. So this one is already available. Basically, this introduced in the after releasing the .NET 5 with the Blazor WebAssembly with .NET 5. When you have .NET Labs.Blazor, which is the name of your project, and .styles, and this is basically for the isolated CSS files. When you go ahead and you have styles for each component. Like you see, there is a code behind file which is contain the CSS for the component. OK. Oh, really, really sorry for that. Sorry. Maybe I shared. OK. OK. Oh, I'm really sorry for that, but I'm just sharing the web window. That by mistake. OK, let's make. We didn't do that much here. OK. Yeah, thanks a lot for mentioning, because I didn't notice that. Well, the screen is here, but I don't know what's happening with me. So basically, this is the project. And as I have said, you can clone this repository from GitHub. It's available github/aksoftware98/.NET Labs. And all our job for the previous 8 sessions were on the server side. Right now, we are on the client side with the project called the .NET Labs.Blazor. So basically, this project is still empty. We didn't done anything. And right now, to get started, right-click on dependencies, go to Manage Nuget Packages, and here, search for Blazor Fluent UI. And you have 2 choices. Either you can install them component by component. This is just in case you need a specific component like the text box, the callout, the model, or whatever. Or if you need them all, like in our case, you can install a package called BlazorFluentUI.AllComponents. So basically, you can find it here. I have already installed it when I wasn't sharing my screen. Sorry for that. So just click here, click install. If you are following on Mac, so you can just basically follow the following command, .NET add package, Blazor Fluent UI.AllComponents. And so you will be able then to install this package. So this is the first thing that we should do. Right now, if we go back to how to use, then in this page, we are going to get started from the first step by copying this, the JS, and this one. Let's go to the solution explorer, www.root. and let's go to index.html. So here, you are going to paste that in this place. So basically, this is the JS part, and this is the style sheet that already exists, because in the .NET Labs.Blazor.Styles, this one introduced with the Blazor WebAssembly and .NET 5, because in some components you have access right now for isolated CSS. So if we go to pages or shared, as you can see, this is like nav menu is a component, and here you have a code behind file called navmenu.razor.css, and this is also just contain the CSS for only the component nav menu. So this is a great feature introduced, and to be able to leverage its capabilities, you have to add this. By default, it already exists, but if you are migrating your app from Blazor 3.1 with .NET Core 3.1, so you have to add this link. The reference is to be the name of your project, as you can see it here, like .NET Labs.Blazor, then .styles.css, and then let's add the JS file. Okay, this is the first step. Right now, the next one. We need to add link for this, basically a CSS files. Okay, I'm going just to take the script and put it at the end, like that. So what this one has is basically it contains all the styles for the Microsoft Fluent UI. You can use them in your Blazor project, or in if you are building any website like with PHP or React, whatever, they are providing all the styles here. And if you want to go deeply with those styles and what they provide, you can, from this link, here you have access for all the stuff, like the colors of Microsoft. Here you have the cards that basically they are using. You can note this in the Azure DevOps or the Azure. Those are the classes names for the CSS. And you have a huge variety of icons available for you here. Look at that. There is tons of icons for all your cases, like user. So you can find a lot of stuff. And also layout, in addition to the typography, which is very important. So yeah, this CSS link is basically to access those styles from Microsoft. So right now, we are done from this part. Let's go back to this page. And we have right now to add the Blazor Fluent UI to register the service of Blazor Fluent UI in the program.cs. So let's go to program.cs. And here, we are going to type builder, services, but add Blazor Fluent UI. Okay, let's add using to Blazor Fluent UI. Okay, that's great. So right now we have added the service. So let's follow the other steps. Now we should add the using to Blazor Fluent UI in the imports. So in this case, we have access for all this content from all other components. So okay, let's go ahead and do that. Using Blazor Fluent UI. Like this. Save. Great, let's go back. So right now, regarding the themes, we have to add BFU themes around the app.razor. This is going to be the top layer. So let's go ahead and do that. Okay. This. Okay, so just surround all your app with this one. And right now, yeah, of course, I'm going to share all the links, even for the API and for all the stuff we have done here. And in addition to all of that, you will find all the changes on the GitHub directly if you would like to just clone it. And yeah, for sure, I'm going to put all the links in the description box. So the last thing is to add the layer. Components requires layer. So some components like the model and the callout, like all the component that basically pops up on the screen from a random space, they need this. So let's go ahead and just add that around router. So basically here. Okay, so I think right now we are just ready to go with this project. So I'm going to close this, click save, and save. Okay, that's great. So right now, let's basically go ahead and run this project to see if everything is just going fine. We will put a button, and then we will make sure that Blazor Fluent UI is just working very well. Okay, but here we got an error. Let's see, what do we have? Okay, WebAssembly rendering. Okay, so I think this one will be related. Okay, sometimes let me put this here. So sometimes this makes a difference. Let's go back to the documentation. Okay, still. Oh, okay, that's great. Maybe the web page was cached, so you can just, after you implement all of that, just make sure to refresh your page using Control F5. So in this case, the cache of the web will be basically just refreshed, and in this case, everything will work just fine. So let's right now put a button. Okay, still getting an errors. Oh yeah, this is not related to Fluent UI. This is because the fetch data component is secured, and we are right now we are not logged in. So it's just working very fine. Let's try to put a button to make sure. Then 100%, like it's just perfect. So I'll go to this place, and then I'll go to the pages, index, and for this one here, I will add a few button. Okay, let's go to this one. Click on the component, so we have this button. So let's try to copy this. I'm going to paste it here. Okay, we don't need all these functionalities. We are just looking for see the button to make sure that it's just working fine. Okay, great. Project again. Oh, that's fantastic. Look at that. We have a very perfect Fluent UI button existing on our screen. So it looks like everything is just working very fine. And we got Blazor Fluent UI to work perfectly on our project. So starting from this point, we can just build on top of those components that are available here. And again, very, very thanks for everyone who worked on this, because they done a great job to implement that. In addition to this, they are providing it for us in a very, very easy way to implement all the code. is just here. So right now we are done from this part. I hope you enjoyed it. If there is any questions about this or or any parts of implementing this library, you can ask it in the comments section. Before we go ahead and proceed to the next part, which is setting up the HTTP client and setting up the authentication part to build on top of all of that for the rest of the course, because those are going to be the infrastructure of our client-side project. OK, so now we should talk about the next part, which is setting up the HTTP client and the authentication for our system, and to provide this in a very easy way to all other pages so they can build on top of that. So let's go first into the Swagger UI. So the first endpoint and the most important one, which is the login, because this one will give us the access for within the system, and especially for the admin. So this one takes into the body the email and password, just a very simple object, as you can see here. And it returns basically this response that contains a success, the access token, and the expiry date. In this course, we haven't talked about the refresh token and this stuff, so the expiry date is going to be very long range. So we are just interested in the access token. So if we open up Postman, OK, great. So if we go to history here, and we should see, OK, here I have this, which is basically a post request to that endpoint /API/authentication/login. And it's a post. The body contains this, which is the default admin we have in the system, or the default user we have. So when you click send, OK, so great. We got 200 status code. And this is the result we got. The access token, the expiry date is 6 is true. So the authentication system, or how it's going to be built, basically, we are going first to set up the HTTP client. So in this case, every time we send any request, it will go to the storage of the browser, check if there is an access token, and automatically attach it to the request and send it. So you are not going to do this on every request you are going to send to the server by fetching the token, set it in the header, and send it. We are going to use something called delegating handler. So it's a very cool concept. You are going to learn about this in just a bit. And then we are going to set a local authentication state provider. So this one will basically manage the authentication of our system. And this access token will be stored in the storage of the browser for this website. So the authentication will start by first checking if there is an access token in the local storage. If yes, then instead of fetching the user data, what we are going to do is, as you know, this claims has a set of claims, or sorry, this token has a set of claims. If we copy this token as it is, and we go to a Microsoft website called JSON-Web-Tokens.ms. OK, this is great. Right now, if you try to paste the content, so look at that. The access token always consists of 3 parts. This one, and this one, and this is the one in the middle that basically contains the payload of this access token, which are the set of the claims that represent the user basically in the system. So if you look at this, this is after the token has been decoded, so we can see all the stuff, all the claims we have. So we have the name identifier claim, which is basically the user ID, and we have the given name, we have the surname, in addition to the email address, and we have the role, and we have those are basically related to the audience and issuer, the expiry date. We are this is out of, we are not going to deal with this. What we need is basically those claims that represent the user. So we are going to check in the local storage for the access token. We are going to do the same for what this library just did, or this website. Fetch the claims, put them in the user in the authentication state, and then in this case, the Blazor app will know that, okay, right now you are authenticated. There is a user. Other than that, it should redirect the user back to the login page. So let's get started first by setting up the HTTP client, and then we will create the login page. So if we go to the program.cs, and here by default, Microsoft initialized the Blazor app with a default HTTP client registration that has a base address for, because this is a Blazor app that's ASP.NET Core hosted. So the backend, just the API serves this app, so they are on the same domain. So we don't need to be worried about the course or other stuff. And the URL of the application is the same for the API. So this is great. But what we're going to do is to create something called delegating handler to attach the token to this request whenever we do that. So first, I will create here a new class. I will call this authorization message handler. So what is basically authorization message handler, or, okay, this one. Using System.IdentityModel.Tokens.Jwt. Okay, what is basically this one? If you are familiar with an ASP.NET Core, you know that the application is about set of middlewares, and the HTTP request comes passing from the first middleware to the other, and there is some middleware that basically returns the request back, or make a response and return it back to the client. Microsoft created this concept and basically just working the same for each HTTP request that you are sending from the client. Whenever you are sending the request, this request could pass by a set of delegating handler. So each of those can basically manipulate that request a little bit, and then at the end, they will going to send it to the server. So why we do this? We are going to do that for one time. For every time we send the request, this authorization handler will be responsible to fetch the access token from the local storage and set it at the header of the HTTP request, instead of doing this ourselves every time. If you have watched the Planner app before, that was a little complicated process. By typing the access token, pass it to the services, and so on. Right now, with messages handler, this becomes very easy. So okay. So it's this library. Let's install it. That's great. And let's go to the program.cs. And here, builder.services.add Blazor local storage. Like that. So we are able to inject this in other services. So this is great. Now, the first step to create the handler is to inject the local storage service. Great. Let's call it storage service. And create the constructor. And we'll put it here in the constructor. Storage service. Okay, that's great. Now, if we have a look at this, there is a function exists in the parent class in the delegating handler called sendAsync. So basically, this being called by when we send any HTTP request. So if you want to manipulate this request, we can do that here. this is the request, and this is the function that basically send the request to the next message handler or to the server if there is no more message handler. So what we want to do, basically, this one is going to be very simple. Just fetch the access token from the storage and set it to the header just in case it exists. So we will make it async. And here we will check if await storage service dot contains key async. We will check if there is a key called access token. So great. If there is a key, then let's fetch it. So I'll type access token equal the wait storage dot get item as a string, because it's just basically a string value. We will call it access token, and request dot headers dot authorization equals the new carrier, and here we pass the value of the access token. Make this one wait for this function. Okay, this is it. So, okay. So basically, this is our authorization handler. It's pretty simple. The only thing that it does is just basically fit the access token from the local storage and set it to the header of each request, and that's it. Right now, let's see how we are going to set up our HTTP client to deal with this authorization message handler. So the first thing, we are going to get rid of this, but first, say services.add HTTP client. Okay, we need to install a package for this, and I think it's called System.IdentityModel.Tokens.Jwt. I forget its name. .extensions.htp. Okay, yeah, this is it. So it's called Microsoft.Extensions.Http. Okay, this is great. And right now, so we will give it a name. I will call it dotNet labs.api. This is HTTP client for the dotNet labs.api, just like this. And then here, client, we can configure that. And the only thing that we need to configure is to set the base address, client.base address equals to this one. Okay, let me get rid of this. Okay, that's fine. Now, what we have to do is to attach that authorization message handler to this one. So whenever we make a request for this, it's going to basically pass with that message handler. So here there is another extension method called add HTTP message handler. So if we click on that, here we can set its type, which is authorization message handler. So it's just like this. So this is basically pretty easy. And we still have two minor things to do. First, we need to register this as a service. So let's do that by services.add transient here, and we'll say authorization message handler. I have to do this. And the second one, we have to initialize an HTTP, the HTTP factory, which is basically going to create an instance for this whenever we call it. So it's going to be like this, .add transient as well. Service provider .get service called iHTTP client factory. So this service will be responsible to create an HTTP client instances. Okay, this function right now returned an instance for this. There is a function called create client. So here, pass the name of the client for the HTTP client. Basically, it's called .NET apps.api. So this is everything. Right now, let's make a very quick recap for this in case there is something complicated. So there is something called HTTP Client Factory, which is this one. It's just a service existing in .NET that allows you to create instances of HTTP client. Why we have this? Because sometimes your application basically calls multiple APIs. So each API with a specific authorization, with specific messages handler, and one to the other until it reaches to the server. So on each one of those, you can manipulate your HTTP request the way you want. And the only thing that we need to do for this one is just to set the access token, if there is access token, in case that the user is logged in, to set it in the header of the request. And that's it. Then just complete sending the request. So right now we have implemented the initializing the HTTP client. This part. Okay, that's great. Right now for the authentication part, we have to do this. Basically, we have right now to create something called local authentication state provider, which is basically the provider that's going to implement the authentication flow in our system, which will be based on the access token that exists in the local storage. So let's do that. First, I will go to this one, click add, and I will add a new class. This class will be called local authentication state provider. I'm calling it local because this authentication will be locally based on the local storage of the browser. But maybe there is other type of authentication state provider, like the one if you are dealing maybe Facebook authentication, Gmail, or whatever. So it should inherit from authentication state provider. Okay, it's called authenticate. Okay, again, I forgot its name. Okay, let me check another project very quick, because it has been from time to time to create those, because in every project you just create this once. So I usually just forget the names of such functions. Okay, this is the local state. Oh yeah, it's called authentication state provider, but okay, I think, yeah, sorry for that. We need to install another library, which is Microsoft, ASP.NET Core, components, authorization. Yeah, it's this one. Let's install it. Okay, so here we go. Right now we have the Microsoft ASP.NET Core Components dot this local state provider. Okay, we have added the using, and because this is an abstract class, we need to implement it. Okay, here we have this function that basically get the authentication state async. How it's going to know that this user is logged in or not? It's basically by returning an authentication state that has a claims principal object has a set of claims. So this is the authentication. Now, before we get started, again, we need to inject the local storage. So let's copy this. And let's just change its name. Like that. Okay, this is great. So mark this one as async. Okay, this is cool. I will put it in a try catch just in case something happened. E and console.writeLine e.message, and then return new authentication state of new claims principal. This means just an empty user, so it looks like this user is not logged in because just a claims principal without any claims inside. So this means the user is not logged in. And here, again, we'll do just the same thing. We will check if there is an access token or no. Storage service dot contains key access token. So if it's not containing this key, so simply just do the same. Return an empty user, which indicates the user is not logged in. Okay, in case the token exists, what we are going to do? First, we are going to bring this token. Wait. Storage service dot get item as string async. Access token. That. And then what you'll do is basically, now, you remember when here we used this library to, or this web tool to basically decode this web token and fetch the claims. Now we are going to do the same on the client side to get all the claims inside that represents the user, like the first name, last name, ID, email, and role. So to do this, you have to create an object of type JWT equals the type called JWT security token handler. Okay, you need to install this library called System.IdentityModel.Tokens.Jwt. Let's install it. Okay, great. This is great. Now we have this handler. Sorry, I'm going to call it handler. And for this one, this is the JSON web tokens. It will be equals to handler.read JWT or .read token. And here we can pass the string. Okay, so this one will basically give me the token. As you can see, if I type JWT dot, where are the claims? Sorry, it should be read JWT token. Okay, great. So now I have the access token as a JWT object. As you can see, JWT security token, I have access for the issuer, the audience, and the claims, which is basically the most important part for me. So the claims are just like this. Those are the ID, given name, surname, email address, and role. So what I have to do right now is to create an identity object with a new claims identity. And this one takes the claim and the name of our authentication schema. So the claims are jwt.claims. And the name of this schema is basically, we'll call it barrier. So it's just like barrier token. Now we can create the user equals a new claims principal, and we pass the identity for it. So we have a user object with all the set of the claims and the authentication scheme for this. And what we can do at the end is just return new authentication state, and we pass the user for it. So this one will returns a logged in user that has all the claims. We will see how we'll have access to this from the UI in just a few minutes. But meanwhile, if there is any question about this, I know like it's a little bit long and complicated, but yeah, this part is very crucial and important. And anyway, you'll go ahead and set this only once in every project you do. And the good thing about this is you can go ahead to the GitHub repo and just fetch this code whenever you are starting a new project and put it in your site, because somehow it's always the same if you are following the same authentication type every time. But the good thing is just to understand what's going on here. So this is the login process, but we still have something very important in the authentication state provider. There is always a very important method called notify authentication state changed. So this one will notify like all the components about the changes of the authentication that's happening basically right now, and we should call this function and return this state. So I'm going to put it here as a authentication or var state equals new authentication state. We pass the user. But this one wants to return a task of authentication state, while this one is just so what you can do is say task.from result state. And here, what we do is just we return state. So basically, this is it. This is everything about that. Now, we have our authentication state provider just working very well. So let's go ahead and try this. Let's go to program first. And here I will inject or register our authentication state provider. .add scooped for the authentication state provider. Need to import the namespace. And the implementation for this is going to be our custom authentication state provider. So just like that. So this is basically going to check the authentication when we'll implement the login page. Right now, there's other step we should do by going to the app.razor. And for the router view, we are not going to use the router view anymore. What we are going to use is authorize router view, just like this. So this authorized router view basically handles gives us the ability to reach for the authorized view or not authorized view components, so we can use them in our app to make sure that if we want to show something for the users that only logged in, or if you want to show other things for the user who are not logged in. So in case the user is not logged in and trying to access some secure component, we are going to show you don't have access to this. Please log in. Okay. So because the time is passed very fast, so right now we're just going to test the authentication system if it's just working fine. And in the next session, we will implement just the request to the server, like login and register. They are going to be very easy and quick while this is set up. This is the job that's going to take time. So we have this right now, the authorized router view. And this is if not authorized, we want to show this. So put it like this. And this is great. Now, we will simulate the login process manually by ourselves by pasting the access token in the local storage in case it worked fine. So this means it's working. So when we just make the login request and store the access token in the local storage, it will just work very fine. So now I will go to imports and I will using Microsoft.ASP.NET Core authorization. Important. Now I'll go to pages, and anyway, the fetch data is basically making a request to the weather forecast API, which is anyway, it's just secured. So the user shouldn't have access to this one if he's not logged in. So let's add an attribute, authorize. Soft ASP.NET Core authorization. We can basically add this imports. I hope you are still enjoying this. After all, like somehow this complicated stuff. Okay, so right now, if the user is not authenticated, he won't be access to this component. And if he's authenticated, then as you can see, here is trying to create a new instance of the HTTP related to the authorization message handler. And in this case, you see, we are not going to set the access token because this one will do this job for us. So let's just try right now to run the project, and let's see how things will go. So I will add a breakpoint here. And first, I'm not logged in because the login requires an access token to be exists in the local storage. So let's see first what's going to happen. Okay, we got an error. Let's see what we have. Okay, there is no registered service for of type. Okay, sorry for that, because for this one to work, basically this authorized attribute and this authorized stuff in the for what we have added, we need here to add to register the services, but add authorization core. Yes. Okay. So great. Right now we have access to this, but if we try to access the fetch data, oh, look at that. We will get, you don't have, sorry, we didn't write access. So you don't have access to this page. Please log in. And as we have said, don't worry about this. We are going to fix all of that in the layout when we are designing the pages. So you don't have access to this. So basically, the user has to be logged in to be able to do this stuff. And as we have said, the login is basically, if we go to the developer tools and we go here to the application, great. And if we go to the local storage, open up this one. Okay, here. So maybe we can add something manually here, which is the access token. I will add it, access token. And its value is going to be this access token. Okay, great. So right now, I'm going to set some, I will put an breakpoint here, and I will put another breakpoint in the authorization message handler. So let's go ahead and go to this page. And let's just refresh. Oh, look at that. Right now, we were able to access this very smoothly. We didn't, I don't know why the breakpoints didn't hit, but let's try to run the project again. Okay. Maybe there is something. Okay, I need to have a look at the debugging, but for now, because the time is very limited, let me make a very quick for what happens and how this one basically worked in this way. So first, when we try to access this protected page, the fetch data, what happening actually is it's going to this local authentication state and checks of, okay, there is an contains access token. If there is an access token, then okay, I'm going to put this token, fetch it from the local storage, then pass it to a JWT security token handler function called read JWT token. Basically, this one will give us the token as a set of claims and issuer audience and all other stuff, the same way we created that from the ASP.NET Core. And then we have created the user object, which is set of claims and the name of the authentication scheme. In addition to that, then we have created the claims principal. This is basically the real user object that has those identity. And at the end, we just return this state. And we have notified other components or the full application about what happened. So right now, the user is logged in. Then, when this component is opening, basically on initialization, as you can see right now, this one is trying to make a call for the / weather forecast. And it's protected. Let's try to do this by, I will duplicate this one. I'll make it get. Weather forecast. Let's click send. And as you can see, I'll get 401 because I need the access token. If I go to the authorization, barrier token, just bring this from here, and click send. So I will be able to get this. So what happens here is, as we have said, this HTTP client object is associated with an authorization message handler, and the user is logged in. So this means there is an access token in the local storage. So when we click next, or when this is sending the request, it goes to this one. It tries to check there is an access token, and yes, there is an access token. Then fetch it and put it in the authorization property in the header of the request, and basically continue sending your request. You can have multiple messaging handlers, but in our scenario, we need only this one. So it sends a request and it returns with the data successfully. So everything is just working very fine, and we can show some data just before we end in this session. So here I will have a authorize view. So I'll type h2 welcome and add context, which will give us access to the user property dot claims or dot find first. Let's use this function that returns the first claim for us that has the name. I'm going to use claim types, system dot security dot claims dot claim types dot given name. So this one will give me the first name of the logged in user. Let's try to run this again. And meanwhile, if there is any questions about all the stuff that we have done, I know it's complicated, but the code will be available on GitHub. So just take a look at this and you will understand it in addition to the video. And for any questions, you can post them here, or you can post those questions on Twitter if you would like. So if you go to fetch data, then, okay, sorry, we have printed the full claim. We need to print just the value, but as you can see, this is the claim and this is the name of the user. So the authentication is just working very fine. The Microsoft Blazor Fluent UI is just working very fine. And the initializing the HTTP clients with a very smooth pipeline to set the access token and all this stuff is also working very fine. So right now we have all the infrastructure to complete building the project. All the stuff are going to be very easy and quick somehow. And in addition to that, very interesting. So this, we can say that this one is the hardest session in case if you are new for this stuff and you didn't get the point out of 100% of what we have done. But again, I'm also available to answer any of your questions. So I hope you enjoyed this, like me here while teaching this. So thanks everyone for joining. And yeah, at the end, if there is any questions, please post them in the comments so we can have a look at them before we end the session. Okay, we got a question. If we receive a token in the login phase, why we need to another authorization part now? Basically, there's going to be no authorization part after you log in the token. After we implement the login page and get the access token, it's going to be stored in the browser, and just like what happened in this case when we set it manually. So then we are going to go ahead and call this function, get authentication state async, which is basically in terms of what it's going to do to check if there is a token, and then if yes, and yes, after we log in, there's going to be a token. If the login operation is succeeded, then it will put this and notify other components about this. So, and this will happen basically just once. And whenever you try to access any authorized stuff, and in this case, like this authorized is basically requires the user to be authenticated. And to be authenticated, this means there should be a user existing or an access token existing in the local storage of the browser. So this is a process we will do it only once. And in the login, when we will implement the login UI, what's going to happen is just basically we'll fit the token, store this value in the local storage, and just make a call for this function just to notify other components and the full application that, hey, right now this user is authenticated. So they refresh the state about that, and then we proceed to the application normally. And the user is logged in as long as this access token is still within the local storage. So I hope you get the point out of this, or maybe if I misunderstood your question, you can just put some further details about that. The store part will be the same if we receive a token from Active Directory P2C. Okay, basically, this is why I recommend you going to Azure Active Directory and Azure Active Directory P2C, because all the stuff that we are doing here, creating this local authentication state provider and making the storing process and all of the stuff that we are doing manually, basically in the using Azure Active Directory or the Microsoft MSAL library for authentication, it traps all this stuff for you behind the scenes. So this is why when you implement Azure Active Directory, you go to Azure, you create the application, and then you come here, you just put the credentials in the app settings, and then all is done. Because you have a function in the program.cs called add MSAL authentication, I think. So that function is taking the the responsibility for all the stuff that we have implemented here. So this is why that's 2 lines authentication when you implement something like Azure Active Directory or Active Directory B2C. So basically, behind the scenes, they are just doing the same, yes. But yeah, the way of fetching the token is different from the one that we have. But yeah, as I've said, this is going to be just the same, but the stuff is existing behind the scenes. I think MSAL is open source, so you can check GitHub to see what they are doing behind the scenes to implement their authentication mechanism. But at the end, they are inheriting from authentication state provider, and they are doing just exactly the same thing by getting the token, decoded it, get the claims, create a user principal, and all this stuff, and notify this state changed. But yeah, the flexibility you get here is right now you are the owner of your users in a way or another. So some people prefer this. So I hope that answered the questions. And yeah, it's a pleasure for helping. So all of this will be available on GitHub, and I will collect all the links and the stuff that we mentioned in this session to put it in the description box. Thank you so much again for joining and watching this. And I'll probably see you in the upcoming Saturday to start implementing the UI and developing, structuring the layout, and start implementing the login and the register page. So thank you so much for watching, and see you after a few days.